The rain came down in sheets so thick that Penelope Lawson could barely see the muddy street ahead of her wagon. And the only thing harder than the storm was the rejection she had faced at every door in Spokane, Washington territory. She pulled her soaked shawl tighter around her shoulders as she guided the tired horse through the downpour, her heart heavy with desperation and grief. 3 weeks had passed since cholera had taken her husband Thomas during their journey west, leaving her alone with nothing but a wagon, a dying horse, and the clothes on her back. The boarding house proprietor had taken one look at her mud-stained dress and empty purse before shaking his head. The hotel clerk had been even less kind, suggesting she try the church, which had turned her away because the reverend's wife did not trust a woman traveling alone. The general store owner had refused to let her sleep in his stable, citing concerns about theft. Even the saloon keeper, despite his profession, had told her to move along when she asked about a corner where she might rest until morning. Penelope had never imagined such cruelty existed in the world. Back in Missouri, neighbors helped neighbors. Communities rallied around widows and orphans. But here in the Washington territory, in the autumn of 1876, she had discovered that kindness was a luxury few could afford to strangers, and trust was even more precious than gold. The wagon wheel hit a deep rut, nearly throwing her from the seat. She cried out, grabbing the wet wood to steady herself. The horse whinnied in protest, its legs trembling with exhaustion. They had been traveling since dawn, and night was falling fast. The temperature was dropping too, and her wet clothes clung to her skin like ice. Through the curtain of rain, she spotted a light in the distance. A farmhouse set back from the main road with smoke rising from its chimney. Her heart lifted with desperate hope, though experience had taught her not to expect much. Still, she had no choice. Another hour in this storm, and she would surely freeze to death. The path leading to the house was rutted and overgrown, suggesting it did not see much traffic. The house itself was modest but well-maintained, with a barn nearby and a corral holding several horses. Penelope brought her wagon to a stop near the porch and climbed down, her legs nearly buckling beneath her. She had not eaten since yesterday morning, and exhaustion pulled at every muscle in her body. She stumbled up the porch steps and knocked on the door, trying to keep the desperation from overwhelming her. "Please," she prayed silently. "Please let someone here have mercy." The door opened, and a man stood in the doorway, backlit by the warm glow of a fireplace. He was tall, with broad shoulders and dark hair that fell just past his collar. His face was weathered but kind, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. He wore simple clothes, a work shirt and denim pants, and held a dish towel in one hand as if she had interrupted him during supper. "Please," Penelope said, her voice breaking. "I need help. I have nowhere else to go." The man looked at her for a long moment, taking in her soaked clothing, her trembling hands, and the wagon with its dying horse. Then, without a single question, he stepped aside and gestured for her to enter. "Come in out of the rain," he said simply. His voice was deep and steady, with none of the suspicion or judgment she had grown accustomed to throughout the day. Penelope stared at him, hardly daring to believe what was happening. "You will let me in, just like that. You are cold and wet and clearly in need," he replied. "That is all I need to know. Now come inside before you catch your death." She did not need to be told twice. Penelope stepped into the house, water dripping from her clothes onto the wooden floor. The warmth from the fireplace wrapped around her like an embrace, and she felt tears prick her eyes. "I am sorry about the floor," she began, but the man waved away her concern. "Floor will dry. You stand by the fire and get warm. I will see to your horse." Before she could protest, he had pulled on a coat and hat and headed back out into the storm. Penelope moved closer to the fire, her hands outstretched toward the flames. She could not remember the last time she had felt such warmth. The house was simple but comfortable, with handmade furniture and clean floors. A pot of something that smelled delicious simmered on the stove, making her stomach clench with hunger. She looked down at herself and felt a wave of shame. Her dress was torn and filthy, caked with mud from the road. Her hair hung in wet tangles down her back. She looked like a vagrant, a beggar, and yet this man had welcomed her without hesitation. The door opened again and the man entered, shaking water from his hat. "Your horse is in the barn with food and water. He is in rough shape, but I think he will recover with rest and proper care." "Thank you," Penelope said, her voice thick with emotion. "I cannot tell you what your kindness means to me. Everyone else in town turned me away." The man removed his coat and hung it by the door. "I am Wade Morrison. This is my land and you are welcome here for as long as you need." "Penelope Lawson," she replied. "I am a widow. My husband died 3 weeks ago on the trail. I have been trying to make it to Spokane, but I have no money and nowhere to stay." Wade nodded, his expression sympathetic but not pitying. "I am sorry for your loss. You must be hungry. I have stew on the stove if you would like some." "I could not impose," Penelope began, but her stomach growled loudly, betraying her. Wade smiled, the expression transforming his serious face into something warm and welcoming. "I insist. Sit down and let me get you a bowl." Penelope sank into one of the chairs at the small wooden table, her legs finally giving out. She watched as Wade ladled thick beef stew into a bowl and set it before her with a chunk of fresh bread. The smell alone was enough to make her dizzy with hunger. "Eat slowly," Wade advised, sitting down across from her with his own bowl. "If you have not eaten in a while, you do not want to make yourself sick." She nodded and took a small bite, forcing herself to chew slowly even though every instinct screamed at her to devour the food as quickly as possible. It was the most delicious thing she had ever tasted, rich and savory with tender chunks of beef and vegetables. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Wade spoke again. "You said everyone in town turned you away," Penelope nodded, swallowing a bite of bread. "The boarding house, the hotel, the church, even the stable. No one would help me because I have no money and I am traveling alone. They all looked at me with such suspicion, as if I were a criminal instead of someone in need." Wade's jaw tightened. "That is not right. This territory is supposed to be a place where people can start fresh, build new lives. Turning away someone in need goes against everything we should stand for." "I thought the same," Penelope said quietly. "But I suppose desperation makes people hard. They have their own problems to worry about." "Desperation should make people more understanding, not less," Wade replied firmly. "We have all needed help at some point. That is what community is supposed to be about." Penelope studied him across the table, wondering what sort of man would take in a complete stranger without question. He was younger than she had first thought, probably in his early 30s, with calloused hands that spoke of hard work and honest labor. There was a gentleness in his manner that surprised her, a quiet confidence that had nothing to do with bravado or pride. "Why did you help me?" she asked. "You do not know anything about me. I could be anyone." Wade met her eyes steadily. "Could say the same about anyone. Life is about taking chances on people. Besides, I know enough. I know you are cold and hungry and scared. I know you have lost someone you loved and you are trying to survive. That is enough for me." Tears spilled down Penelope's cheeks before she could stop them. The kindness in his words after a day of such cruelty broke something open inside her. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs she could no longer contain. She heard the scrape of Wade's chair as he stood, and then felt his hand rest gently on her shoulder. "You are safe here," he said quietly. "I promise you that. You can rest tonight without fear, and tomorrow we will figure out what comes next." Penelope nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. She wiped her eyes with her dirty hands, embarrassed by her outburst. "I am sorry. I should not fall apart like this. You have every right to fall apart, Wade said, returning to his seat. You have been through hell. Anyone would break under that kind of strain. She managed a watery smile. You are very kind. Too kind, perhaps. You should not trust strangers so easily. My mother always said that hospitality was the highest virtue, Wade replied. She used to say that you never know when you might be entertaining angels unaware. Besides, trusting people has served me well enough so far. Your mother sounds like she was a wonderful woman. She was. She passed 5 years ago, but I still try to live by the lessons she taught me. They finished their meal in companionable silence, and then Wade showed Penelope to a small bedroom at the back of the house. It was simply furnished with a bed, a dresser, and a washstand, but to her exhausted eyes it looked like paradise. There is a nightgown in the dresser that belonged to my mother, Wade said, standing in the doorway. You are welcome to use it. Leave your wet clothes outside the door and I will wash them for you tomorrow. You do not have to do that, Penelope protested. I know I do not have to. I want to. Now get some rest. You look like you are about to collapse. After he closed the door, Penelope stripped off her wet, filthy clothes and found the nightgown he had mentioned. It was soft and clean and smelled faintly of lavender. She pulled it on gratefully and climbed into the bed, pulling the quilts up to her chin. The mattress was soft, the pillows were plump, and for the first time in weeks, she felt safe. She expected to lie awake, her mind churning with worry about the future, but exhaustion claimed her almost immediately. Her last thought before sleep took her was that she had been lucky, incredibly lucky, to find Wade Morrison's door. When Penelope woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the window and she could smell coffee and bacon. For a moment she was disoriented, unable to remember where she was. Then the events of the previous night came flooding back and she sat up, looking around the unfamiliar room. Someone had left a basin of clean water on the washstand along with a towel and a bar of soap. Her clothes were nowhere to be seen, but there was a simple dress laid out on the chair, along with undergarments and stockings. Everything looked clean and neatly pressed. Penelope washed quickly and dressed, marveling at Wade's thoughtfulness. The dress was a bit large on her, but it was clean and whole, which was more than could be said for her own tattered garment. She braided her still damp hair and made her way to the kitchen. Wade was at the stove, his back to her as he flipped bacon in a cast-iron skillet. He had rolled up his shirt sleeves, revealing strong forearms, and his dark hair was still damp from what she assumed was his own morning wash. "Good morning," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. He turned and smiled. "Morning, I hope you slept well." "Better than I have in weeks," Penelope admitted. "Thank you for the clothes. I found them in the room. They were my mother's as well. I have been meaning to give them away, but I kept putting it off. I am glad they can be of use to you." "Are you sure? These seem too precious to give to a stranger." Wade shrugged, turning back to the stove. "My mother would have wanted them to help someone who needed them. She was practical that way. Besides, you are not a stranger anymore. You are a guest in my home." He served them both generous portions of bacon, eggs, and fried potatoes, along with thick slices of bread and strong black coffee. Penelope tried to eat slowly, but the food was so good and she was so hungry that she found herself cleaning her plate faster than was probably polite. "I should explain my situation more fully," she said, setting down her fork. "My husband Thomas and I were traveling from Missouri to California. We heard there were opportunities there, land to be bought cheaply. But Thomas fell ill on the trail. We made it as far as here before he died. I spent what little money we had on his burial and medicine. Now I have nothing." Wade listened quietly, his expression thoughtful. "What did you plan to do in California?" Thomas was a farmer. "He wanted to grow wheat and maybe keep some cattle. I am a decent cook and I can sew and keep house. We thought we could build a good life there." Those are valuable skills anywhere, Wade observed. What are your plans now? Penelope laughed bitterly. I do not have plans. I was hoping to find work in Spokane, but as you saw, no one there wants anything to do with me. I suppose I will have to move on and try my luck elsewhere. Or you could stay here. She looked up sharply, searching his face for signs that he was joking, but his expression was entirely serious. What do you mean? Wade leaned back in his chair, considering his words carefully. I run this ranch alone. It is not much, just a few head of cattle and some horses, but it keeps me busy. I could use help around the place. Someone to help with the cooking and cleaning, maybe tend a vegetable garden. In exchange, you would have room and board and a small wage. You would hire me. Just like that, I would, if you are interested. Penelope felt hope surge in her chest, followed quickly by suspicion. What would you expect from me? In return for this generosity, Wade's eyes widened in understanding. Nothing beyond honest work. You would have your own room, your privacy, and my respect. I am offering you employment, Mrs. Lawson, nothing more. The formality of his address and the sincerity in his voice convinced her. Then I accept, gratefully. I promise you will not regret this kindness. I am sure I will not, Wade said, standing to clear the dishes. Now, let me show you around the place so you know what you are getting into. The ranch was modest but well kept. There were 20 head of cattle grazing in the pasture, along with 6 horses in the corral. The barn was sturdy and organized, with tools hanging neatly on the walls and fresh hay in the loft. Wade also had a chicken coop with a dozen hens, a root cellar stocked with vegetables and preserved goods, and a small smokehouse where he cured meat. I do most of the work myself, Wade explained as they walked. I have a hand who comes by a few times a week to help with the heavier jobs, but otherwise it is just me. The house gets neglected more often than I would like. I am not much for cooking beyond the basics, and my cleaning leaves something to be desired. Penelope smiled. Those are things I can certainly help with. When would you like me to start? Whenever you feel up to it. There is no rush. You have been through an ordeal and you need time to recover. But Penelope was eager to begin. After so many days of feeling helpless and desperate, she wanted to do something useful, to prove that she was worth the faith Wade had placed in her. That very afternoon, she set about cleaning the house from top to bottom, scrubbing floors and washing windows until everything gleamed. Wade watched her with a mixture of amusement and concern. You do not have to do everything in one day. I want to, Penelope replied, wringing out a rag. I want to earn my keep. You have already earned it just by being willing to work, but I can see you are determined, so I will leave you to it. By evening, the house looked better than it had in years. Penelope had even managed to prepare a proper supper of roasted chicken with vegetables and biscuits. They ate together at the small table, falling into an easy conversation about the ranch and the surrounding area. How long have you lived here? Penelope asked. About 7 years. I came west after my mother died. She had always talked about seeing the frontier, so I figured I would do it for her. I worked on other people's ranches for a few years, saved my money, and bought this place 4 years ago. You have other family? Wade shook his head. My father died when I was young. It was just my mother and me. What about you? Do you have family back in Missouri? No, my parents passed when I was 17. Thomas was all I had. Her voice caught on her late husband's name, and Wade reached across the table to briefly squeeze her hand. I am sorry. It is hard to lose the people we love, Penelope nodded, grateful for his understanding. Thomas was a good man. We had only been married 2 years. It all seemed so unfair. Life often is unfair, Wade agreed. But we survive, we keep going. That is all we can do. They fell silent for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Then Wade cleared his throat and changed the subject to lighter matters, telling her about the local wildlife and the challenges of ranching in the Washington Territory. Penelope found herself laughing at his stories. the sound strange to her own ears after so many weeks of grief. Over the following days and weeks, Penelope settled into a routine at the ranch. She rose early each morning to prepare breakfast, then spent her days tending the garden, caring for the chickens, and maintaining the house. Wade worked from dawn to dusk, mending fences, caring for the livestock, and handling the countless other tasks that came with running a ranch. Despite her initial wariness, Penelope quickly came to trust Wade completely. He was unfailingly polite and respectful, never once making her feel uncomfortable or threatened. He kept his word about everything, paying her the wage he had promised at the end of each week and respecting her privacy. But more than that, she found herself enjoying his company. Wade was intelligent and thoughtful, with a dry sense of humor that surprised her. In the evenings, after supper, they would often sit by the fire and talk, discussing everything from politics to philosophy to their dreams for the future. "What do you want out of life?" Penelope asked him one night in late October as they sat watching the flames dance in the fireplace. Wade considered the question carefully. "I want to build something lasting. This ranch, it is just the beginning. I want to expand it, maybe have enough land to raise horses properly. But more than that, I want to be part of a community. I want to have neighbors I can count on and who can count on me. I want to leave the world a little better than I found it." "Those are good goals," Penelope said softly. "What about you? What do you want?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I do not know any more. I thought I knew. I thought I would spend my life with Thomas, raising children and working our farm. Now I just want to feel safe again, to feel like I have a purpose." "You have a purpose here," Wade said firmly. "You have made this house a home. I have lived here for 4 years and it has never felt the way it does now. You have brought life back to this place." Penelope felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "Thank you, Wade. That means more than you know." As November arrived and the weather turned colder, Penelope found herself thinking about Wade more and more. She noticed things about him she had not paid attention to before. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. The gentle way he spoke to the horses. The strength in his hands when he chopped wood for the fire. She tried to push these thoughts away, feeling guilty for even having them. Thomas had only been dead for 2 months. It was too soon to think about another man, especially one who had been nothing but kind to her. She did not want Wade to think she was trying to take advantage of his generosity. But the feelings persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. She found herself looking forward to their evening conversations, to the sound of his voice and the warmth of his smile. She noticed when he came in from working, his shirt damp with sweat, and felt a flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with hunger or grief. Wade seemed equally affected, though he tried to hide it. Penelope caught him watching her sometimes when he thought she was not looking, his expression unguarded and soft. Once, their hands brushed while reaching for the same dish, and the contact sent a jolt through her that left her breathless. The first snow came in early December, covering the ranch in a blanket of white. Penelope stood at the window watching it fall, remembering how Thomas had loved the snow. The memory brought tears to her eyes, but they were gentler tears than before, tinged with acceptance rather than raw grief. "Are you all right?" Wade asked, coming to stand beside her. "I was thinking about Thomas," she admitted. "He loved winter. He used to say it made the world look clean and new. He sounds like he was a good man. He was. But he is gone now, and I am still here." She turned to look at Wade, her heart pounding. "I have been feeling guilty about that, about being here, about being happy, about having feelings I should not have." Wade's expression grew serious. "What kind of feelings?" Penelope took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "Feelings for you." "I know it is too soon. I know you took me in out of kindness and you probably do not think of me that way, but I cannot keep pretending. These past few months with you have meant everything to me. You have given me more than just shelter and work. You have given me hope again." For a long moment, Wade did not speak. Then he reached out and gently cupped her face in his hand. I have been trying not to say anything because I did not want to pressure you or make you uncomfortable. But the truth is, I have come to care for you deeply, Penelope. You are brave and strong and kind, and I find myself thinking about you constantly. If it is too soon, I understand. I can wait. But I want you to know that my feelings are real. Penelope felt tears spill down her cheeks, but these were tears of joy rather than sorrow. It is not too soon. Thomas would want me to be happy. He would want me to live, not just survive. And you make me want to live again. Wade pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her in an embrace that felt like coming home. Penelope buried her face in his chest, breathing in the scent of him, wood smoke and leather and winter air. She felt his lips brush the top of her head, a gesture so tender it made her heart ache. I promise I will take care of you, Wade murmured. I will never give you reason to regret trusting me. You already take care of me, Penelope said, pulling back to look up at him. You have from the very first night. You are the kindest man I have ever known, Wade Morrison. He smiled then, that warm smile that transformed his face, and bent his head to kiss her. It was a gentle kiss, sweet and tentative, asking permission rather than demanding. Penelope responded, rising on her toes to press closer to him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathless. Wade rested his forehead against hers, his hand still on her waist. I want to do this right, he said. I want to court you properly the way you deserve. I want everyone to know that you are precious to me. I would like that, Penelope whispered. I would like that very much. And so Wade courted her, despite the fact that they were already living under the same roof. He brought her wildflowers when he found them. He carved her a beautiful wooden box for her sewing supplies. He took her into Spokane for church on Sundays and made sure everyone knew that she was under his protection. The townspeople who had turned her away that rainy night looked at her differently now. Some seemed ashamed of how they had treated her. Others were simply glad to see that she had found her footing. The Reverend's wife, in particular, went out of her way to apologize. I am sorry I turned you away, she said after services one Sunday in January. I was wrong to judge you so harshly. Can you forgive me? Penelope hesitated, remembering the cold rejection, the fear she had felt that night. But then she felt Wade's hand squeeze hers encouragingly, and she found herself nodding. I forgive you. We all make mistakes when we are afraid. The woman's eyes filled with tears. You are very gracious. I hope you will be happy here in Spokane. I am happy, Penelope said, smiling up at Wade. Happier than I ever thought I would be again. As winter gave way to spring, Wade and Penelope's relationship deepened. They spent their evenings planning for the future, talking about expanding the ranch and maybe adding some sheep to their livestock. They discussed building a larger house, one with room for the children they both hoped to have someday. One warm evening in April, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Wade took Penelope's hand in his. I have something I want to ask you. Penelope's heart began to race. She had been hoping for this, dreaming of it, but she hardly dared believe it was really happening. Wade stood and then knelt before her, pulling a small box from his pocket. Penelope Lawson, you have brought joy and light into my life. You have made my house a home and my days meaningful. I cannot imagine spending the rest of my life with anyone but you. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small ruby set in it. It was my mother's ring, he explained. I know it is not much, but it comes with all my love and devotion. Tears streamed down Penelope's face as she nodded emphatically. Yes, yes, of course I will marry you. I would be honored to wear your mother's ring and to be your wife. Wade slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms and kissing her deeply. When they finally broke apart, both of them were laughing and crying at the same time. I love you, Penelope said. I did not think I could ever feel this way again, but I do. I love you with all my heart." "I love you too," Wade replied, cupping her face in his hands. "I loved you from the moment you stood on my porch asking for help. I think I have been waiting for you my whole life." They were married in June, in a simple ceremony at the church in Spokane. The entire town turned out for the wedding, eager to celebrate the union of two people who had found love in the most unexpected circumstances. Even the people who had turned Penelope away seemed genuinely happy for her, as if her happiness somehow redeemed their earlier cruelty. Penelope wore a dress that Wade had bought for her in town, a beautiful ivory gown with lace at the collar and cuffs. Wade wore his best suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his eyes shining with love as he watched his bride walk down the aisle. The Reverend spoke about the importance of kindness and compassion, about how opening our doors to strangers can sometimes mean opening our hearts to love. He praised Wade for his generosity and Penelope for her courage, calling them an example of what the frontier spirit should be. When it came time to exchange vows, both Wade and Penelope spoke from the heart. "I promise to love you and care for you all the days of my life," Wade said, his voice strong and clear. "I promise to be a man worthy of your trust and your love. I promise to build a life with you that would make both our mothers proud." Penelope's voice trembled with emotion as she made her own vows. "I promise to stand by your side through whatever comes. I promise to make our house a home and to cherish the gift of love you have given me. I promise to honor the kindness you showed a desperate stranger and to spend my life showing you that your faith in me was not misplaced." When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Wade kissed her with such tenderness that several people in the congregation openly wept. Penelope felt as if her heart might burst with happiness. 6 months ago, she had been alone and afraid, turned away by everyone she asked for help. Now she was married to a wonderful man, surrounded by a community that had come to accept her, embarking on a future full of promise. The celebration after the wedding was joyful and loud. The townspeople had organized a feast in the church hall, with tables groaning under the weight of food and drink. There was music and dancing, and Penelope laughed until her sides hurt as Wade spun her around the floor. "I am not much of a dancer," he apologized after stepping on her foot for the 3rd time. "I do not care," Penelope said, beaming up at him. "This is the happiest day of my life." "Mine too," Wade agreed, pulling her close, "and it is just the beginning." They left the celebration as the sun was setting, driving back to the ranch in Wade's wagon. Penelope leaned against her husband's shoulder, marveling at how right it felt to call him that. Her husband. Her Wade. When they arrived home, Wade lifted her down from the wagon and then, without warning, swept her up into his arms. Penelope gasped and laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck. "What are you doing?" "Carrying my bride over the threshold," Wade said, grinning. "It is tradition." He carried her into the house and set her down gently in front of the fireplace, which someone had lit for them while they were at the celebration. The house was warm and welcoming, with flowers on the table and candles burning in the windows. "It is perfect," Penelope whispered, looking around. "You are perfect," Wade said, pulling her into his arms. "And you are mine now, my wife, my partner, my love." He kissed her then, and this kiss was different from all the others. It was deeper, more passionate, full of promise and desire. Penelope responded eagerly, her hands running through his hair, her body pressing against his. "Are you sure about this?" Wade asked, pulling back slightly to look into her eyes. "We can take this as slowly as you need." "I am sure," Penelope said firmly. "I want this. I want you. I want to start our life together tonight." Wade needed no further encouragement. He took her hand and led her to the bedroom, to the bed they would now share as husband and wife. And there, in the soft glow of candlelight, they came together with love and passion, beginning their married life in the sweetest way possible. The months that followed were the happiest Penelope had ever known. She and Wade worked together to expand the ranch, adding more cattle and building a larger barn. They planted a bigger garden and added to the chicken coop. Every improvement they made felt like an investment in their future, a statement of faith in the life they were building together. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. Wade would hold Penelope close, his arm around her shoulders, and they would talk about their dreams and plans. Sometimes they did not talk at all, content simply to be together in comfortable silence. Penelope felt herself healing in ways she had not thought possible. The grief over Thomas's death would always be a part of her, but it no longer consumed her. She had learned that the heart was capable of holding both sorrow and joy, both past and present. She would always remember her first husband with fondness, but that did not diminish what she felt for Wade. If anything, having loved and lost made her appreciate what she had now even more. By autumn, Penelope began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited until she was certain before telling Wade, wanting to be sure. When she finally shared the news with him one evening in October, exactly 1 year after she had first knocked on his door, Wade's face lit up with joy. "A baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "We are going to have a baby. We are," Penelope confirmed, laughing at his excitement. "In the spring, if I have calculated correctly." Wade let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around. Then he set her down carefully, as if she were made of glass. "I should not have done that. I do not want to hurt you or the baby." "We are fine," Penelope assured him, touched by his concern. "I am not so fragile." But Wade insisted on treating her like she was precious from that moment on. He took over more of the heavy chores, refusing to let her lift anything too heavy or work too hard. He made sure she ate well and got plenty of rest. His care and attention made Penelope feel cherished in a way she had never experienced before. As winter settled over the ranch, Penelope spent her time preparing for the baby's arrival. She sewed tiny clothes and blankets, transforming the small room next to theirs into a nursery. Wade built a beautiful cradle from oak, carving delicate patterns into the wood. They would sit together in the evenings, Wade's hand resting on Penelope's growing belly, feeling their child move and kick. "What do you think we will have?" Wade asked one night. "A boy or a girl? I do not know," Penelope said, covering his hand with hers. "But whichever it is, they will be loved beyond measure." "That they will," Wade agreed. "And they will know what it means to be kind, to help others, to open doors for people who need it." Penelope smiled, thinking about the night Wade had opened his door to her. "Our child will be lucky to have you as a father." "Our child will be lucky to have us both," Wade corrected. "You are going to be an amazing mother, Penelope. I see how much love you have to give." The baby came in April, during a spring storm that reminded Penelope of the night she had arrived at the ranch. Her labor was long and difficult, but Wade stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and encouraging her. The doctor from town had come out to attend the birth, along with 2 women from the church to assist. Finally, as dawn was breaking, Penelope gave one last push and heard the most beautiful sound in the world, her baby's first cry. The doctor lifted the infant, cleaned it quickly, and announced, "It is a boy, a healthy, strong boy." Wade's eyes filled with tears as the doctor placed the baby in Penelope's arms. The infant had a shock of dark hair like his father and was wailing lustily, his tiny fists waving in the air. Penelope looked down at her son and felt a surge of love so powerful it took her breath away. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." Wade sat on the edge of the bed, one arm around Penelope and the other hand gently touching his son's head. "He is perfect," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "You did such a good job. I am so proud of you." They named the boy William Thomas Morrison, honoring both Wade's father and Penelope's first husband. It felt right to acknowledge the past while celebrating the future. Thomas had been part of Penelope's journey, and his death had led her to Wade. In a way, all three men were connected in the chain of events that had led to this moment. As Penelope recovered from the birth, Wade proved to be a devoted father. He would walk the floor with William when the baby cried at night, singing soft lullabies in his deep voice. He changed diapers and gave baths, seeming completely unafraid of the tiny, fragile infant. Watching him with their son made Penelope fall even more deeply in love with her husband. William grew quickly, a healthy, happy baby who smiled easily and rarely fussed. By the time he was 6 months old, he was crawling everywhere, getting into everything he could reach. Wade would laugh and scoop him up, saying, "You are going to keep us on our toes, are you not, little man?" When William was a year old, Penelope discovered she was pregnant again. This time the news was less of a surprise, but no less joyful. Wade was thrilled at the prospect of having another child, and William seemed to sense something was different, becoming more cuddly and affectionate with his mother. Their second child, a daughter they named Pearl Margaret, was born on a bright summer day in July. She had Penelope's blonde hair and Wade's dark eyes, and from the moment she was born, she was the apple of her father's eye. Wade would hold her for hours, just staring at her in wonder, marveling at her tiny fingers and toes. "I never knew I could love anyone as much as I love you and our children," he told Penelope one night as they watched William sleeping in his bed and Pearl nursing contentedly. "You have given me everything I ever wanted and more than I ever dared to dream of." "You gave me everything first," Penelope reminded him. "You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me a home when everyone else turned me away. You gave me love when I thought I would never feel it again." Wade kissed her forehead gently. "We gave each other a second chance." That is what love is, I think. Choosing each other every day, building something beautiful together. As the years passed, the Morrison Ranch prospered. Wade expanded the herd and began raising horses as he had always dreamed of doing. Penelope's garden grew larger and more productive, and she began selling vegetables and preserves in town. They hired a young man named Jacob to help with the ranch work, and he quickly became like family. William grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved working with the horses. Pearl was bright and cheerful, always singing or dancing around the house. When William was 5 and Pearl was 3, Penelope gave birth to twin boys, Robert and Samuel. The house that had once seemed too big for one lonely cowboy was now full of life and laughter, exactly as it should be. The people of Spokane had long since forgotten that Penelope had once been turned away from every door. She was known now as Mrs. Morrison, the rancher's wife, a kind and generous woman who was always willing to help a neighbor in need. She never forgot what it felt like to be desperate and alone, and she made sure that anyone who came to their door seeking help was welcomed without question, just as Wade had welcomed her. One autumn evening, when William was 8 and Pearl was 6, a young woman came to their door. She was thin and exhausted, with hollow eyes and tattered clothes. "Please," she said, "I need help. I have nowhere else to go." Penelope looked at Wade and saw the same memory reflected in his eyes. A rainy night 7 years ago, a desperate woman on the porch. Without hesitation, Penelope stepped aside and gestured for the young woman to enter. "Come in," she said warmly. "You are safe here." As the woman stepped inside, tears streaming down her face, William looked up at his mother. "Who is that, Mama?" "Someone who needs our help," Penelope replied, putting her arm around her son's shoulders. "And we always help people who need it. That is what family does." Wade came to stand beside them, his hand resting on Pearl's head. "Your mother is right. We have been blessed with so much, and it is our responsibility to share that blessing with others." They settled the young woman, whose name was Sarah, in the room that Penelope had once occupied. Over the next few weeks, they helped her find her footing, just as Wade had helped Penelope. Sarah eventually found work in town and moved into her own place, but she remained close to the Morrison family, often joining them for Sunday suppers. Years continued to pass in a blur of happy moments and hard work. William grew tall and strong, taking on more responsibility at the ranch. Pearl became an accomplished seamstress and helped her mother with the household duties. The twins were a handful, always getting into mischief, but they were good boys with kind hearts. When Penelope and Wade celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary, they threw a party at the ranch for all their friends and neighbors. As Penelope looked around at the crowd of people laughing and talking, at her healthy, happy children, at the thriving ranch they had built together, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "What are you thinking about?" Wade asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Penelope said, leaning back against him. 10 years ago, I was desperate and alone. I thought my life was over, and then you opened your door to me. "Best decision I ever made," Wade said, kissing her temple. "You have made every day of the last 10 years worth living. You have given me a family, a purpose, a reason to keep being the best man I can be." "You already were the best man," Penelope said, turning in his arms to face him. "That is why you helped me. That is why I fell in love with you. That is why I thank God every day that I found your door instead of someone else's." Wade smiled and kissed her, a sweet, lingering kiss that still made her heart race after all these years. "I love you, Penelope Morrison, today and always." "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. "Forever and always." As the party continued around them, they stood together, watching their children play and their friends celebrate. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. It was the same view Penelope had seen that first morning after Wade took her in, but everything was different now. Then she had been broken and afraid. Now she was whole and happy, surrounded by love. The years continued to flow like a river, sometimes smooth and peaceful, sometimes rushing and turbulent, but always moving forward. William fell in love with the daughter of a neighboring rancher and married her in a beautiful ceremony when he was 22. Pearl married a kind young lawyer from town when she was 20. The twins grew up to be fine young men, one choosing to stay on the ranch and the other deciding to become a teacher. Through it all, Wade and Penelope remained deeply in love. They still sat together on the porch in the evenings, still held hands at church on Sunday mornings, still looked at each other as if they were newlyweds. Their love had matured and deepened over the years, becoming something solid and enduring, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. When they became grandparents for the first time, Wade held his grandson with the same wonder and tenderness he had shown their own children. "This is what it is all about," he said to Penelope as they watched William with his new son. "Family, love. Building something that lasts beyond our own lives." Penelope nodded, her eyes misty with tears. "Thomas would be happy to see this," she said quietly. "To know that his death led to all this life and love." "I think he would," Wade agreed, "and I hope he knows how grateful I am. Because if you had not loved him first, if you had not been brave enough to keep going after you lost him, you never would have come to my door that night." As they grew older, Wade and Penelope began to slow down. They turned more of the ranch operations over to William and Samuel, content to spend their days in the garden and with their grandchildren. They had 7 grandchildren in total, each one precious and unique, each one carrying forward the legacy of love and kindness that Wade and Penelope had worked so hard to build. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There was food and music and laughter, the house and yard full of people they loved. As Penelope looked around at the crowd, She marveled at how one act of kindness had rippled outward, creating all of this love and life. "Thank you," she said to Wade as they danced together under the stars. "For what?" "For opening your door, for seeing me when I was invisible to everyone else, for giving me a reason to live again." Wade pulled her closer, his hand warm on her back. "You do not have to thank me for that. Loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life." "Still," Penelope insisted, "not everyone would have done what you did. Most people would have turned me away like everyone else did. But you saw someone in need and you helped without asking for anything in return. That kind of kindness is rare." "Maybe," Wade conceded. "But you would have done the same. You have proven that over and over again through the years. Every time someone has needed help, you have been there. Every time someone has knocked on our door, you have welcomed them. You are just as kind as I am, maybe more so." Penelope smiled. "We are a good match, then." "The best match," Wade agreed, kissing her gently. "My mother used to say that the right person makes you better, makes you want to be your best self. That is what you have done for me, Penelope. Every single day for 25 years. As they continued to dance, their children and grandchildren watching with fond smiles, Penelope felt completely at peace. Her life had not turned out the way she had once planned. She had lost Thomas, had faced rejection and despair, had known what it meant to have nowhere to turn. But she had also known kindness and love. She had built a life richer and fuller than anything she had imagined. And it had all started with a cowboy who opened his door without questions, who chose kindness over suspicion, who proved that one person's compassion could change everything. Years later, when Wade and Penelope were both in their 70s, they would sit on that same porch and tell their grandchildren about the night they met. The children would listen with wide eyes as Penelope described the storm, the fear, the rejection she had faced in town. They would gasp when she told them how Wade had opened the door and welcomed her without a single question. "Why did you help her, Grandpa?" one of the children would inevitably ask, and Wade would always give the same answer: "Because she needed help, and I had the power to give it." That is all the reason anyone ever needs. The grandchildren would nod solemnly, absorbing the lesson. And Penelope would look at Wade with all the love in her heart, grateful beyond words for the man he was and the life they had built together. They lived into their 80s, both of them in relatively good health thanks to years of hard work and clean living. Wade's hair turned completely white, and Penelope's face became lined with wrinkles, but they still held hands every day and still looked at each other with love. On a warm summer evening, as they sat together on their beloved porch watching the sunset, Wade turned to Penelope and said, "I think I could die happy right now." "Do not talk like that," Penelope scolded gently. "You are not going anywhere." "I am not planning to," Wade assured her with a smile. "I am just saying that if I did, I would have no regrets. We have had a good life, you and I, better than I ever dreamed possible." "We have," Penelope agreed, squeezing his hand. "And we still have time left. I am not ready to let you go yet, Wade Morrison." "I am not ready to go either," Wade said. "I plan to stick around and drive you crazy for many more years." Penelope laughed, the sound as bright as it had been when she was young. "You have never driven me crazy. Well, maybe a little bit when you track mud into my clean kitchen." "I will try to do better about that," Wade promised, his eyes twinkling. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. The air was sweet with the smell of roses from Penelope's garden, and somewhere in the distance, cattle were lowing peacefully. "Do you ever think about that night?" Penelope asked. "The night I showed up on your doorstep, all the time," Wade admitted. "I think about how easily things could have gone differently. What if I had not been home? What if I had turned you away like everyone else did? We would have missed out on all of this." "I think we were meant to find each other," Penelope said softly. "I do not know if I believe in fate exactly, but I think there are moments when the universe aligns perfectly. That night was one of those moments. "I am glad the universe aligned for us," Wade said, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Penelope. Then and now and always." As darkness fell and the stars began to appear, they remained on the porch, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and had built a love that would endure long after they were gone. Their children would tell their stories to their children, and the legacy of that one act of kindness would ripple forward through generations. Wade and Penelope Morrison lived into their late 80s, eventually passing away within months of each other, just as everyone knew they would. At their funerals, people spoke of their generosity, their love for each other, and the example they had set for the community. But more than anything, people remembered the story of how they met. A widow refused shelter everywhere, and a cowboy who opened his door without questions. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down to William and his children. The house remained standing, that same porch where Wade and Penelope had spent so many evenings together still solid and welcoming. And the tradition of helping those in need continued, because the Morrison family never forgot where they came from. Years after Wade and Penelope were gone, a traveler passing through Spokane asked a local merchant about the Morrison Ranch. "That is a special place," the merchant said. "It was started by a man who knew the value of kindness and a woman who knew the pain of being turned away. They built something beautiful together, and their descendants carry on that legacy. If you ever need help in these parts, you can always count on the Morrisons." And so the story lived on, a testament to the power of compassion and the beauty of love found in the most unexpected places. It reminded everyone who heard it that sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply open our door to someone in need, because we never know what beautiful things might grow from that one small act of kindness. The widow who was refused shelter everywhere had found not just a door that opened, but a heart that welcomed her home, and together they had built a love story that would be remembered for generations to come.